6 a.m. I turn off my own water valve on my 40-acre ranch. 10 seconds later, the HOA Karen bursts out her front door, hair soaked in shampoo, bathrobe flapping open, screaming bloody murder.
You cut my water! Call 911 right now! He's sabotaging the neighborhood!
Soap dripping into her eyes, she's literally dialing the cops on me for touching equipment on land my family has owned since 1967. 20 minutes later, 3 deputies show up, hands on holsters, treating me like I just hijacked the city's water supply. All because this entitled HOA president thought my private well was somehow hers. But what she didn't realize, her hysterical 911 call was caught on my security cameras in glorious 4K. And that footage is about to end her reign of terror in the most satisfying way imaginable. What would you do if an HOA Karen called the cops on you for using your own property? Drop your revenge ideas in the comments. So there I am watching this soap-covered lunatic screaming at 3 very confused deputies. You're probably wondering, how does shutting off my water valve affect her shower? Here's the beautiful irony. When Delilah's ex-husband built Whispering Oaks, he cut every corner possible to maximize profit. Instead of proper individual water lines, he installed a cheap shared pressure system that illegally tapped into my grandfather's original easement line running along our property border. So when I switched to my well, their whole subdivision lost pressure, completely legal on my end. My grandfather's water rights predate their development by 60 years, but nobody told Princess Delilah that when she bought her McMansion. The deputies spend 20 minutes sorting this out. Property maps spread across their cruiser hood, trying to understand how a simple valve flip created a domestic terrorism call. Marcus Rivera, the county inspector, arrives and confirms what I already know. Everything I did was perfectly legal. Meanwhile, Delilah's pacing her driveway in designer silk pajamas, still dripping shampoo, demanding they arrest me for destroying her property value and sabotaging the neighborhood infrastructure. The smell of her expensive vanilla shampoo mixed with pure entitlement hangs in the morning air like a bad perfume commercial. The officers finally leave, but not before the lead deputy shakes his head and mutters, "Ma'am, the man turned off his own water on his own land. That's not a crime." Let me back up and explain how we got to this point. I'm Jackson Briggs, retired Navy engineer. 26 years fixing nuclear submarines taught me 2 things: how to solve complex problems and how to spot people who create unnecessary drama. When Grandpa left me this 40-acre slice of heaven 2 years ago, I thought I'd found peace. Wrong. This land's been in our family since my great-great-grandfather bought it in 1892. We're talking mineral rights, water rights, grazing rights, the complete package. Grandpa built everything himself. Hand-dug the well, ran electrical lines, constructed that workshop where he restored classic Ford tractors until he was 85 years old. Pure Texas independence, the way it's supposed to be. Then California came to Texas. Developer bought the adjacent land in 2019, started building McMansions for city folks playing weekend cowboy. The crown jewel was a 4,500 square foot monument to California taste. 3-car garage, enough marble for a courthouse, and a price tag that made local ranchers choke on their coffee. Delilah Thornfield bought that house before the paint dried. 48 years old, fresh off a messy divorce from some Silicon Valley tech executive, armed with serious alimony money and a burning desire to control everyone around her. She moved to Texas talking about small-town values and authentic ranch living. 3 months later, she was HOA president, promising to maintain property standards and eliminate rural blight that degrades our investment. Translation: get rid of the ranch that made her McMansion look less exclusive. The first complaint letter arrived with my morning coffee, the paper crisp and expensive like everything else about her. My livestock, 3 horses and a dozen chickens, were apparently incompatible with the residential character of the neighborhood. Never mind that my animals had been here since before her neighborhood existed. Then came the tax bomb that really got my attention. Thanks to the HOA's improvements, decorative streetlights, a community pond, and landscaping that belonged on a golf course, my property taxes exploded from $20,800 to $12,400 overnight. I was suddenly paying for amenities I never voted for, couldn't use, and definitely didn't want. But Delilah was just getting started. Workshop too loud during the day, truck too old and rusty for the neighborhood aesthetic, fence too rustic and unprofessional looking. Every week brought another complaint with the same ultimatum: join the HOA voluntarily, or she'd find a legal way to force me in. The breaking point came when County Inspector Marcus Rivera showed up to investigate her complaint about unsanitary livestock conditions. This poor guy spent 2 hours documenting that my horses were healthier than most subdivision residents, my chicken coop cleaner than her kitchen, and my workshop up to every safety code in Texas. Marcus pulled me aside as he loaded his clipboard back in his truck. "Jackson, I've been doing this job 15 years. Your place is textbook perfect. But that woman next door, she's filed more complaints in 3 months than most people file in their entire lives. Watch yourself, brother." That's when Delilah made her first real mistake. She filed an official petition claiming my property was grandfathered into HOA jurisdiction and demanding I comply with their water usage restrictions, a 60% reduction, or face immediate legal action. The sound of her designer heels clicking across my gravel driveway as she delivered that ultimatum personally, that crunch under expensive leather was like music to my ears, because that's the moment I knew she'd picked the wrong retired Navy engineer to mess with. That petition was like a declaration of war wrapped in legal letterhead. But Delilah wasn't content to just threaten. She wanted ammunition to destroy me completely. 2 weeks later, I'm fixing fence posts when I spot this guy in khakis lurking around my property with a professional camera. Turns out Princess Delilah hired a private investigator to document my excessive water usage and environmental violations. This moron was photographing my sprinkler system like he'd discovered an international smuggling operation, taking notes on when my horses drank water and how often my chickens used their waterer. The smell of creosote from my fence posts mixed with his cheap cologne created this weird contrast: honest ranch work meeting suburban paranoia. She filed a formal complaint with the county water authority claiming I was running an illegal commercial irrigation system that violated drought restrictions. According to her expert testimony, I was hoarding water resources during a critical shortage and stealing from municipal supplies for non-essential landscaping. The complaint demanded immediate investigation and emergency water usage restrictions for my property. But here's the thing about being a Navy engineer. You learn to document everything and research before you respond. So while she was playing games with cameras and complaints, I was doing actual detective work in places she'd never think to look. I spent that weekend in the county courthouse basement, digging through records that hadn't seen daylight since Carter was president. Musty file boxes filled with handwritten deeds and survey maps older than my grandfather. What I found was pure legal gold. My water rights didn't just predate her subdivision. They went back to the original Spanish land grant from 1847. We're talking water rights that existed before Texas was even a state, before the county existed, before anyone dreamed of HOAs. My grandfather's 1967 permits weren't the beginning of our claim. They were just modern paperwork updates on something that had been ours for over a century. I'd read about this rule of capture thing back in my engineering school days, but seeing it applied to my own situation was beautiful. In Texas, if you own the dirt, you own every drop of water underneath it. Municipal restrictions, neighborhood complaints, HOA tantrums. None of that legal noise matters when you've got water rights that predate the city government itself. Armed with this historical ammunition, I hired surveyor Jake Morrison to come out and confirm exactly where every boundary line fell. Jake's been measuring Texas property for 30 years, carries a level that's more accurate than GPS, and what he discovered made my entire month. That decorative pond Delilah loved bragging about at neighborhood meetings, the one with the Italian fountain and imported Japanese koi fish that cost more than most people's cars, 3 full feet of it sat on my property. Her precious HOA had built their showcase amenity on land they didn't own, using water they had no legal right to touch. I filed a formal trespassing complaint with the sheriff's department and sent Delilah a certified letter demanding $2,400 in back rent for unauthorized land use. The letter included a detailed water analysis showing her conservation showcase pond consumed more water in 1 month than my entire livestock operation used in 3. But here's where the plot thickened into something really interesting. Those dusty county records revealed something delicious about the construction company that built Whispering Oaks. Thornfield Development LLC, owned by Brad Thornfield, Delilah's ex-husband. The The same guy who'd cut corners on water infrastructure was the same guy who'd accidentally built community features on someone else's property. Now, I'm not saying they deliberately encroached to steal water access for some kind of insurance scam, but when your divorce settlement includes 50% ownership of a construction company, and that company just happens to build illegal water features on your neighbor's land right after you move in next door, that's what 26 years of Navy intelligence training taught me to recognize as a pattern worth investigating further. The real entertainment was watching Delilah receive that certified letter. I happened to be feeding my horses when the mailman delivered it, and through her kitchen window, I could see her face go from confusion to rage to pure panic in about 30 seconds. The sound she made, somewhere between a smoke alarm and a dying coyote, startled my chickens so badly they didn't lay eggs for 3 straight days. Her lawyer's response arrived within 48 hours, cease and desist letter, claiming my survey constituted harassment and demanding I withdraw all false allegations immediately. She threatened defamation lawsuits and intentional infliction of emotional distress charges if I didn't back down. But she also made a critical mistake in that letter. Instead of just denying the encroachment, she claimed the pond was grandfathered in as a pre-existing water feature, and that I was attempting to extort money through false boundary claims. That's when I knew she was completely rattled and starting to make sloppy moves. Nothing screams guilty like threatening to sue someone for presenting documented survey results. She'd gone from playing confident offense to scrambling desperate defense, and I could tell she hadn't realized how badly she'd miscalculated her position. The afternoon breeze carried the sound of her pacing frantically on her back deck. Phone pressed to her ear, probably calling every lawyer in the county trying to find someone who'd tell her what she wanted to hear. Meanwhile, I'm sitting on my porch with a cold beer, watching the sunset paint my legally owned water features in golden light, already planning my next move. Delilah's cease and desist letter was just the appetizer. The main course arrived 2 weeks later when she decided to escalate from water complaints to full-scale legal annihilation. She convinced 3 of her subdivision neighbors to file a joint nuisance lawsuit against me. The complaint alleged my workshop created industrial noise pollution incompatible with residential zoning and demanded a court order limiting my property to residential use only. According to their hired expert, some guy with a decibel meter who probably learned acoustics from a YouTube tutorial, my workshop violated county noise ordinances during reasonable quiet hours. Suddenly, the smell of honest motor oil and welding fumes from my grandfather's shop became toxic industrial emissions endangering neighborhood children and property values. And their legal strategy was beautifully simple. If water restrictions couldn't force me out, they'd eliminate my livelihood by killing my consulting business. No workshop meant no income meant no ability to maintain 40 acres, and eventually I'd be forced to sell. Classic suburban warfare disguised as environmental protection. But here's what happens when you target a guy who spent decades solving impossible problems under pressure. While they were hiring lawyers and acoustic consultants, I was back in that musty courthouse basement, digging through records older than their entire subdivision. What I found was absolutely perfect. My workshop didn't just predate their noise complaints. It predated the noise ordinances themselves by 15 years. When Grandpa built that shop in 1967, this entire area was zoned agricultural and light industrial. Their precious residential zoning didn't exist until 1982, and here's something I remembered from my Navy legal training. Grandfathered usage rights mean existing operations remain legal regardless of whatever new rules get invented later. Even better, those yellowed county records revealed something Delilah definitely hadn't mentioned during her sales pitches. Texas real estate law requires disclosure of existing zoning conflicts within 500 feet of residential property. Agricultural and industrial operations are considered material facts that significantly affect property values and buyer decisions. She'd never disclosed my workshop to anyone. Not once. Not ever. I started making phone calls to every subdivision resident, and boy, was that educational. Turns out half her buyers had no idea they were purchasing homes next to legally protected industrial zoning. Some folks were pretty unhappy learning their exclusive residential community came with permanent workshop noise they couldn't eliminate through complaints or lawsuits. My counterattack was surgical precision. I filed a detailed complaint with the Texas Real Estate Commission documenting Delilah's disclosure failures on every single lot sale. Then, I contacted each subdivision buyer directly, providing copies of zoning records and my grandfather's original permits, along with a clear explanation of their legal reality. The really satisfying part was offering to buy back any lots from buyers who felt misled about the true property conditions. Fair market value, of course, minus appropriate compensation for their losses due to undisclosed zoning conflicts. That evening, as I was organizing my evidence files on the porch, unexpected salvation knocked on my door. Clarence Webb, the retired attorney who'd bought the corner lot farthest from my property, appeared with a bottle of 20-year bourbon and a manila folder thick with documents. Turns out this quiet neighbor had been researching HOA abuse cases for years, just waiting for the right situation to test some legal theories he'd been developing. "Jackson," he said, settling into my spare porch chair with a knowing grin, "that woman made a serious error in judgment last week. She threatened to block my grandson's Eagle Scout project unless I signed her petition against you. Threatening a veteran's neighbor to coerce testimony? That crossed several federal lines." The crisp evening air carried the sound of his papers rustling as he opened that folder, revealing months of meticulous documentation. Phone call recordings, saved emails, time-stamped photographs. Clarence had been building a harassment case that extended far beyond property disputes into civil rights violation territory. When HOAs systematically target military veterans with coordinated harassment campaigns, he explained, pouring bourbon into my coffee mug, federal courts pay very close attention, especially when there's documented coercion of witnesses. But the real bombshell was what he'd discovered about my other lawsuit opponents. 2 neighbors had been promised property tax reductions if they joined the noise complaint. The third had been threatened with his own HOA violation for a fence dispute that would mysteriously disappear if he cooperated against me. "Witness coercion, bribery, and conspiracy," Clarence said, raising his mug in a mock toast, "makes their entire lawsuit legally worthless and gives us grounds for a substantial federal civil rights case." Now, I wasn't planning to sue anybody over hurt feelings or bruised ego. But when you've got documented evidence of systematic harassment targeting your military service, plus provable real estate fraud, plus witness intimidation, that's what strategists call overwhelming leverage. The sound of Delilah's phone ringing constantly that week, angry neighbors demanding explanations about disclosure requirements, drifted through my workshop windows like a beautiful symphony. Meanwhile, I maintained my regular schedule, fixing equipment and running my perfectly legal consulting business on my properly zoned property. She'd escalated from water wars to legal warfare, but she'd forgotten something crucial about picking fights. Always know who you're fighting and what weapons they have access to. Round 2 was decisively mine, but something told me this woman wasn't finished making catastrophically bad decisions. Clarence's bourbon was still warming my chest when Delilah launched her most desperate attack yet. If legal warfare wasn't working fast enough, she'd try something more direct, weaponizing municipal government against me. She'd discovered my water valve was technically accessible from the public easement running along our property line. Armed with this bureaucratic technicality, she convinced 3 city council members that my excessive usage violated emergency drought restrictions and created a public health risk to neighboring communities. The smell of fresh legal documents mixed with morning coffee filled my kitchen when that temporary restraining order arrived. 70% reduction in water consumption or face immediate contempt charges. The order specifically targeted my non-essential irrigation activities and commercial livestock operations, as wasteful usage violating municipal conservation mandates. Beautiful irony. She'd gotten a court order restricting my city water usage right when I was planning to eliminate city water entirely, so I complied. Perfectly, completely, and exactly as the court demanded. At 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, I walked out to that valve with my wrench, officially shut off my entire municipal connection, and switched exclusively to my grandfather's well system. 100% legal, 100% my water, 100% none of her damn business. Here's something I'd learned during my submarine engineering days. When you're dealing with multiple redundant systems, you can shut down one system while keeping full operations running on backup systems. Most civilian properties only have single water sources, but ranch properties like mine were built with independence in mind. My grandfather had dug that well specifically so we'd never depend on outside sources for anything essential. The sweet satisfaction of documenting that valve closure with time-stamped photographs and official water meter readings was better than any victory bourbon. I even sent the court a courtesy letter confirming my complete compliance with their municipal water restrictions. while my ranch continued operating normally on entirely private water sources. For 3 peaceful days, everything ran perfectly. My irrigation system watered the pastures, my livestock had full troughs, my workshop operated normally, all using water I'd owned since 1892. I was technically following every word of that restraining order while maintaining complete operational independence. Then Delilah made the catastrophic error that would ultimately hand me total victory. She'd been conducting daily surveillance drives, monitoring my property like some suburban intelligence operation. When she spotted my sprinklers running and horses drinking from full water troughs, she immediately assumed I was violating court orders. Without bothering to understand the difference between municipal and private water systems, or asking any questions that might have saved her, she grabbed her phone and made the call that would destroy her life. My 4K security system captured every beautiful second. I'd installed those cameras 6 months earlier primarily for livestock monitoring, but they turned out to be the most valuable investment in Texas ranch history. That Tuesday morning, the cameras recorded Delilah standing in her driveway, gesticulating wildly at my property while making animated phone calls. The audio was crystal clear. She was coordinating her next attack. 20 minutes later, she dialed 911 with what she thought was a smoking gun complaint. "I need police immediately," she told the dispatcher. "My neighbor is violating court orders and stealing city water during emergency restrictions." And when asked for specifics, Delilah claimed she'd personally witnessed me manipulating municipal water infrastructure and illegally accessing city supplies in direct contempt of the restraining order. Except what she'd actually observed was me checking the pressure gauge on my own private well pump, on my own property, using water rights my family had owned since before her great-grandparents were born. Sheriff Martinez arrived with 2 deputies and County Inspector Marcus Rivera, treating this like a serious municipal violation investigation. I calmly walked them through both water systems, showed them the sealed municipal valve, explained the completely separate well and spring network, provided all documentation proving legal compliance dating back to 1967. Marcus confirmed what any water systems engineer would know. Operating multiple water sources is not only legal, it's actually beneficial for municipal conservation because it reduces demand on city supplies. The deputies photographed both systems, documented the municipal valve closure, and filed reports confirming 0 violations. But those body cam recordings captured something far more valuable than my innocence. They documented Delilah's deliberate lies. She'd told 911 she witnessed me tampering with city equipment when I was checking my own well. She'd claimed I was stealing municipal water when I was using my grandfather's spring. The crisp sound of those handcuffs clicking would have been music to my ears, but I had bigger plans than immediate gratification. Filing false police reports is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas, but more importantly for my purposes, this incident proved systematic harassment targeting my veteran status. When someone files multiple false complaints against a military veteran's completely legal activities, federal civil rights protections start kicking in. I requested copies of everything: 911 recordings, police reports, body cam footage, dispatcher logs. Then I filed my own formal complaint documenting this as the latest escalation in Delilah's coordinated harassment campaign. That afternoon, I made a call that would change everything. Sarah Palmer, investigative journalist specializing in municipal corruption and HOA abuse, had been tracking similar stories across Texas. "Sarah," I said, watching Delilah pace frantically in her backyard through my workshop window, "I think you're going to want to see this 4K footage." The excited sound of her fingers flying across her keyboard told me this story was about to explode far beyond one neighbor's water obsession. What started as harassment was about to become a federal case study. Delilah had just escalated from nuisance neighbor to documented criminal, and she'd handed me video evidence of every lie. Round 3 wasn't just mine. It was the beginning of her complete destruction. That evening, I poured myself 3 fingers of Clarence's bourbon and settled in to review my security footage, preparing evidence packages for Sarah. The familiar smell of aged whiskey mixed with the electronic hum of my computer as I scrolled through hours of 4K recordings. What I discovered in that footage changed everything. My cameras hadn't just captured Delilah's lies to police. They'd recorded the smoking gun confession that would send her to federal prison. The morning of her hysterical 911 call, the timestamp showed 5:40 a.m. 20 minutes before she discovered my irrigation running, 20 minutes before her staged emergency, Delilah was standing fully dressed in her driveway, animated phone conversation already in progress. The audio quality was crystal clear, every word perfectly preserved. "Okay, I'm calling 911 in 20 minutes claiming I just caught him violating the court order. Make sure you're ready with those backup complaints if this doesn't work. We need him arrested and removed today, or he's going to figure out what we're really doing with that grant money." My blood went cold. She hadn't been innocently showering when I switched water sources. The whole shampoo emergency was carefully orchestrated theater designed to get me arrested and hauled off my property. But what grant money was she talking about? The footage revealed something even more damning. After ending that coordination call, Delilah walked directly to her outdoor spigot, testing her water pressure by turning it off and on repeatedly. When nothing happened, because my well system was completely independent, she made another panicked phone call. "The water pressure thing isn't working like we planned. His system must be completely separate from ours. We need to accelerate the other plan before someone starts investigating the federal money." Federal money. My hands were actually shaking as I called Clarence. 2 hours later, he was sitting at my kitchen table with his laptop and that bourbon bottle, his attorney database access pulling up records I'd never seen. The musty smell of old legal documents seemed to emanate from his screen as he worked. "Holy hell, Jackson," he whispered, highlighting something that made his face go pale. "Look at this." Whispering Oaks subdivision had received $180,000 in federal conservation grants for innovative water management infrastructure designed to integrate existing agricultural water sources with modern residential conservation systems. Translation: they'd told the federal government they had legal permission to use my spring water as part of their conservation plan. They'd never asked my permission, never mentioned this plan during any harassment, never disclosed it to subdivision buyers. They just applied for federal grant money claiming access to water rights they absolutely didn't own. But the rabbit hole went deeper. Construction records showed Thornfield Development LLC, Brad's company, had been paid $240,000 for installing integrated conservation systems and water-saving infrastructure. The actual work completed according to county permits, those decorative fountains, the koi pond that encroached on my property, and landscape irrigation that actually increased water consumption by 40%. No conservation systems, no water-saving technology, no integration with my property, just expensive water features that violated the exact opposite of everything they'd promised federal agencies. "Jackson, this is textbook federal fraud," Clarence said, the sound of his fingers typing frantically filling my kitchen. "They took conservation grant money, spent it on decorative water waste, and filed false progress reports claiming savings that don't exist." The insurance angle made everything worse. Brad's company had filed water damage claims totaling $45,000 for flooding during conservation system installation, except my 6-month-old security footage showed normal dry construction with zero water problems. False insurance paperwork for problems that never happened. Sarah arrived within the hour, bringing a photographer and 2 additional investigative reporters. When I played her the 4K footage of Delilah's coordination calls, her professional composure cracked into pure excitement. "Jesus, Jackson, this isn't neighborhood harassment anymore. You've documented a federal conspiracy involving grant fraud, insurance fraud, and systematic civil rights violations targeting a military veteran. We're talking about a multi-state criminal enterprise." Sarah's preliminary research had uncovered Delilah's pattern across California and Arizona. Identical scam, different LLC names each time, move adjacent to independent water sources, harass owners into selling, apply for federal grants claiming coordination rights, pocket conservation money while installing decorative water waste. "She's done this twice before successfully," Sarah explained, organizing evidence photos on my kitchen table. "But she's never encountered someone with professional-grade surveillance equipment documenting her entire operation." The sweet evening air through my kitchen window carried the sound of my horses peacefully grazing, completely unaware their owner had just become the key witness in a federal racketeering case. Meanwhile, Delilah had no idea her 4K confession was about to become prime evidence for prosecutors. Everything suddenly made perfect sense. She wasn't harassing me because she disliked my ranch. She was panicking because my continued presence threatened to expose years of systematic fraud. Every false complaint, every bogus police report, every legal threat had been increasingly desperate attempts to eliminate the witness who could destroy their criminal enterprise. The power dynamic had completely reversed. I'd thought I was defending my property rights against an entitled neighbor. Instead, I'd accidentally uncovered a sophisticated federal crime operation, and Delilah knew her only hope was removing me before someone connected the dots. My grandfather's land wasn't just my inheritance anymore, it was the evidence that would send multiple people to federal prison for a very long time. The next morning, my kitchen transformed into something between a FBI task force headquarters and the world's most satisfying revenge operation. Evidence files covered every surface. Laptops hummed like angry hornets, and my coffee pot worked overtime, fueling what Clarence cheerfully called the legal ass-kicking of the century. Our alliance had evolved into a precision strike team with one beautiful goal: giving Delilah enough rope to hang herself on live television. Clarence brought 3 decades of courtroom warfare and federal database access that could uncover financial crimes across multiple states. Sarah contributed investigative resources reaching all the way to Washington, plus media connections who specialized in political corruption exposés. Marcus Rivera provided official county documentation that would make federal prosecutors weep with joy. And Jake Morrison had discovered additional property violations that made Delilah's legal position more hopeless than a submarine with screen doors. The smell of fresh printer ink mixed with morning bacon grease as we organized evidence packages that would make FBI agents cancel their weekend plans. Our secret weapon was 18 hours of 4K footage showing Delilah's entire conspiracy in cinematic detail. But something I'd learned during Navy intelligence operations was that raw evidence needs professional presentation to maximize psychological impact. People remember what they see, not what they're told. Sarah's photographer friend Marcus Palmer specialized in legal video presentation and digital forensics for federal cases. "We're creating a documentary that tells the complete story in 20 minutes, he explained, while editing on equipment that belonged in Hollywood studios. Split screens showing Delilah's public lies versus her private confessions, audio enhancement of her coordination calls, synchronized timestamps proving every single statement was premeditated. Our master strategy centered on the annual town water conservation meeting 3 weeks away. For 5 years, Delilah had presented Whispering Oaks as the county's conservation showcase, receiving public awards and recommendations for additional state funding. This year's presentation would be memorable for entirely different reasons. We let her take that podium, Clarence outlined while spreading legal documents across my kitchen table like a general planning battlefield tactics. Let her publicly claim credit for conservation success while cameras roll and federal agents take notes. Then we screen her 4K confession showing the real operation. Sarah was orchestrating media coverage that would ensure maximum humiliation. Environmental crime reporters, HOA corruption specialists, federal prosecution correspondents, everyone wants this story. Plus, the military veteran harassment angle gives it national legs. But here's something most people don't understand about building legal cases. The technical preparation is only half the battle. The other half is psychological warfare, and that's where my submarine training really paid off. For 3 weeks, I had to appear completely defeated, while actually constructing her total destruction. Every public interaction needed to convince Delilah that her harassment was succeeding, and I was ready to surrender my family's land. "Start acting like you're considering selling," Clarence advised, grinning like a shark who'd smelled blood. "Let rumors spread that you can't handle the legal pressure. Make her confident enough to get sloppy with more false statements on record." The acting challenge was surprisingly enjoyable. I started looking defeated during our brief public encounters, letting my shoulders slump when she drove by conducting surveillance. Left real estate brochures visible on my kitchen table where she could spot them through windows. Even mentioned to Marcus Rivera, loud enough for her to overhear, that maybe it's time to find somewhere more peaceful. Sarah was building relationships with federal prosecutors who specialized in white-collar crime and racketeering cases. "They're fascinated by multi-state fraud patterns," she reported during our evening war councils. "Your footage provides the first documented evidence of this scheme actually operating. They want arrests coordinated for maximum media impact." Community preparation required surgical precision. We quietly informed key neighbors about the meeting without revealing our nuclear option. Several subdivision residents who'd discovered Delilah's real estate disclosure violations were eager to attend and ask pointed questions about property values and legal liability. Jake's additional survey work had uncovered a treasure trove of violations. Delilah's imported Japanese garden encroached 14 inches onto county easement property. Her irrigation system violated property lines in 3 different directions. Her decorative lighting violated municipal codes, Her koi pond drainage system dumped directly into protected wetland areas. It's like she deliberately violated every property regulation in Texas, Jake reported with the satisfaction of a professional who appreciated thorough documentation. I've never seen someone break this many laws accidentally. My workshop became our evidence organization center, where we assembled federal RICO documentation that read like a criminal enterprise handbook. Grant applications containing false water rights claims. Insurance paperwork for damage that never existed. Bank records showing money laundering between multiple LLC entities across 3 states. Email threads between Delilah and Brad coordinating false police reports and witness intimidation. The sweet anticipation of justice mixed with familiar motor oil scents from my grandfather's tools as we prepared for what would be our final evidence review. 3 weeks of careful preparation were building toward one perfect moment, watching Delilah publicly claim conservation success seconds before we proved she'd been operating a federal fraud scheme. The evening before the meeting, I sat on my porch with a cold beer, listening to my horses peacefully grazing in pastures watered by springs my family had owned since before Texas was a state. Tomorrow, a woman who thought she could steamroll a Navy veteran through lies and federal fraud was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. She'd picked the wrong neighbor, and the entire county was about to watch her world implode in glorious 4K resolution. The final 3 weeks before the town meeting brought out Delilah's absolute worst. My Oscar-worthy performance as a defeated neighbor had convinced her that victory was within reach, and desperate criminals make the most beautiful mistakes. She hired Westside Security Solutions to patrol subdivision borders with hourly surveillance circuits. According to their contract, which Sarah obtained through public records, they were protecting residents from an increasingly unstable military veteran with documented PTSD episodes who poses clear danger to neighborhood families. The acrid smell of diesel exhaust from their patrol vehicles mixed with sweet morning honeysuckle as they photographed my suspicious activities, feeding horses, fixing fence posts, maintaining equipment that had operated legally since before their subdivision was a developer's wet dream. But Delilah's escalating paranoia was creating federal evidence faster than I could organize it. She filed trespassing complaints claiming I'd been intimidating residents on subdivision property. And the sheriff found zero evidence, but my cameras captured something infinitely more valuable. Footage of Delilah coordinating with security guards to stage incidents that would justify more serious police responses. Her masterpiece was reporting hazardous chemical storage to the county health department, claiming she'd witnessed me improperly handling toxic materials that could contaminate neighborhood water supplies. What she'd actually observed was me changing tractor oil using standard motor oil every Texas rancher keeps in their workshop. The health inspection found my storage exceeded safety standards, but Delilah had committed another felony, filing false reports under penalty of perjury, claiming personal knowledge of violations that didn't exist. Meanwhile, my security system documented her complete meltdown in real time. Trail cameras caught Brad cutting my fence wire at 2 a.m., wearing gloves and a baseball cap, using wire cutters so clearly visible the footage could identify the manufacturer. When I filed vandalism reports, their security contract mysteriously got extended another month. Anonymous complaints flooded county agencies about my unregistered business operations. Someone reported my consulting business to state licensing claiming improper permits. Fake online reviews appeared on my business profiles, all posted from IP addresses registered to Whispering Oaks subdivision. But here's where Delilah's desperation created the mini twist that sealed her fate. Sarah's phone records investigation revealed systematic coordination between Delilah, Brad, the security company, and 3 subdivision residents. They were operating like a criminal enterprise, timing complaints and incidents to maximize psychological pressure while I appeared increasingly isolated. She's building a federal racketeering case against herself in real time, Sarah marveled, reviewing evidence files that kept growing daily. Conspiracy, witness intimidation, systematic harassment of a protected veteran. She's literally writing her own federal indictment. But my counterattack was already in motion. Every false complaint generated official documentation of her lies. Every harassment incident created time-stamped evidence of systematic targeting. Every coordination call was recorded by my enhanced security system. The real bombshell came from Marcus Rivera's water usage investigation. For 3 years, Delilah had filed conservation reports with state agencies claiming progressive water reductions, 15% year 1, 25% year 2, 35% year 3, exactly matching their federal grant promises. Reality was spectacularly different. Actual consumption had increased 40% since subdivision opening, with Delilah's property alone using more water than my entire ranch. She'd been filing false environmental reports for years to maintain federal funding while operating the exact opposite of conservation. She didn't just lie to get the grants, Marcus explained during our evidence review, the rustle of official documents filling my kitchen like whispered secrets. She's been lying to keep them, filing fraudulent progress reports that could trigger environmental protection violations. The harassment intensified as the meeting approached. Daily photo surveillance, imaginary building code violations, attempts to revoke my business license for residential zoning conflicts. My favorite incident involved her demand that county veterinarians remove my horses for creating unsanitary conditions. Dr. Peterson found 3 of the healthiest horses he'd examined in 20 years and filed his own complaint about false animal welfare reporting. "Ma'am, Doctor," Peterson told Delilah while my cameras preserved every word, "these animals are in better condition than most championship show horses. Filing false cruelty reports wastes emergency resources and constitutes a misdemeanor offense." The sound of her sputtering rage as a professional contradicted her lies publicly was better than any television drama. Federal prosecutors confirmed agents would attend the meeting as observers, positioned to make immediate arrests if additional crimes occurred in their presence. Sarah's media contacts were building coverage that would ensure national exposure. But Delilah's final mistake exceeded even my expectations for spectacular stupidity. 2 days before the meeting, she approached me directly on the public easement where my 4K cameras captured everything in courtroom quality detail. She offered to buy my ranch for 30% below market value, claiming subdivision residents had pooled resources to eliminate our property value concerns. When I politely declined, her carefully maintained facade completely shattered. "Listen, you military types never understand when you're completely beaten," she hissed, her voice carrying clearly to my audio equipment. "We've got lawyers, political connections, and financial resources you can't possibly match. You can sell now and leave with something, or we'll keep filing complaints and legal challenges until you lose everything and get forced out anyway. Your choice." That threat, extortion delivered to a military veteran by someone under federal investigation while committing witness intimidation, was the final piece our prosecution team needed. She'd escalated from neighborhood harassment to federal extortion while FBI agents were already building her case file. The town meeting was going to be more devastating than even my submarine warfare training had prepared me to deliver. The evening air carried the peaceful sound of my horses grazing in pastures that would remain in my family long after Delilah learned what happens when you threaten a Navy veteran who fights back with precision weapons. Delilah's extortion threat had crossed every legal line imaginable, but she wasn't finished destroying herself. The final week before the town meeting brought a level of desperation that would have been comedic if it wasn't creating such perfect federal evidence. She'd discovered the meeting agenda included her annual conservation presentation, and I could practically smell her panic from across the property line. For 5 years, she'd basked in public recognition for environmental success that didn't exist. Now she faced presenting fabricated numbers to an audience that would include federal investigators, environmental reporters, and a veteran who possessed 18 hours of 4K footage proving her entire operation was fraudulent. Her solution was typically Delilah: eliminate the witness before the testimony. Monday morning brought a bribery attempt so brazen it left even Clarence speechless. She appeared at my gate with a manila envelope containing what she called a more generous settlement offer. 30 acres of my land for $800,000, still below market value, but dressed up as mutual cooperation for community harmony. The crisp morning air carried the scent of expensive perfume mixed with pure desperation as she delivered her pitch. "Jackson, we both know this legal fighting isn't helping anyone. The community has authorized me to make this final offer. Take it and all the complaints disappear. Everyone wins." When I suggested she put the offer in writing for my attorney's review, her mask slipped completely. No lawyers, no paperwork, no delays. Cash offer, closing next week. Yes or no, right now. My 4K cameras captured every word of her attempted cash bribery, including her admission that rejection would mean serious escalation of legal challenges that will bankrupt you. Tuesday brought character assassination that revealed how thoroughly she'd lost control. She organized a neighborhood petition claiming I was mentally unstable due to combat trauma and needed psychiatric intervention for the safety of community families. The petition demanded county mental health services conduct an involuntary evaluation based on my increasingly erratic behavior and threatening communications, except I'd never communicated with any of her petition signers, ever, about anything. Sarah's investigation revealed Delilah had created an entirely fictional narrative about my deteriorating mental state, complete with fabricated incidents and false witness statements. She convinced 3 neighbors to sign affidavits describing threatening encounters that existed only in her imagination. Wednesday delivered the false flag operation that proved her complete desperation. Someone vandalized the subdivision's decorative mailboxes overnight, spray painting my truck's license plate number on 2 of them. An anonymous tip to Sheriff's Dispatch claimed multiple witnesses saw me acting suspiciously near the crime scene around midnight. Unfortunately for that plan, my trail cameras provided an ironclad alibi. I was home all evening, and the timestamps proved my truck never left my driveway. More importantly, the vandalism footage captured the actual perpetrator, a figure in dark clothing whose build, gait, and vehicle matched Brad Thornfield perfectly. Forensic analysis of the spray paint revealed something even more damning. The paint color exactly matched paint found in Delilah's garage. The same shade she'd used for touching up her mailbox post the previous month. She'd literally used her own supplies to frame me for vandalism. Thursday brought desperate witness intimidation that created additional federal charges. Delilah contacted the County Veterans Services Office claiming I'd made concerning statements about harmful intentions toward neighborhood families. She demanded they conduct emergency psychiatric intervention, describing imaginary threats and fabricated incidents that portrayed me as a dangerous, unstable veteran requiring immediate containment. The Veterans Service Coordinator who responded was Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a former Army psychiatrist who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan. After spending 2 hours at my property reviewing the supposed evidence, Dr. Martinez filed her own report describing Delilah's complaints as systematic false reporting designed to weaponize mental health services against a veteran. Mr. Briggs shows 0 signs of psychological distress, instability, or threat potential, Dr. Martinez documented officially. However, the pattern of false reporting targeting his military service constitutes harassment of a protected class and possible hate crime violations. By Friday, Sarah's media investigation had uncovered the most devastating revelation yet. Delilah had pulled this exact scam in California and Arizona using different company names. Each time, move adjacent to independent water sources, systematically harass property owners, file false complaints targeting veteran or minority status, apply for federal grants claiming coordination rights they didn't possess, then force sales while pocketing conservation money for decorative water features. She's a serial federal fraud operator, Sarah reported, spreading evidence across my kitchen table like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Multiple victims, identical patterns, same players using different LLC formations. This is organized crime masquerading as HOA management. But the final piece of evidence came from an unexpected source. Marcus Rivera had been quietly investigating similar water fraud cases across Texas and discovered something extraordinary. Delilah's operation was connected to at least 12 other subdivisions where conservation grants had funded decorative water features instead of actual conservation infrastructure. This isn't just about your property, Marcus explained, showing me a map dotted with fraud locations. She's been running a statewide federal crime network. Your footage is the first documentation of the actual operation in progress. Saturday morning brought Delilah's last desperate gambit. She filed an emergency court motion claiming I'd made direct threats against her life and demanding immediate protective orders plus property seizure for community safety. The motion included sworn affidavits from 3 witnesses describing detailed threats I'd supposedly made during encounters that never happened. At times when my security footage proved I was in different locations entirely, but filing false sworn statements to federal courts while under FBI investigation was the final nail in her legal coffin. Sunday evening, Sarah received confirmation that federal agents would make arrests immediately following the town meeting presentation. They want her to commit additional crimes in front of witnesses, Sarah explained, grinning like a shark who'd scented blood. Perjury, false reporting, conspiracy. They're building a case that could send multiple people to federal prison for decades. The sweet anticipation of justice mixed with evening barbecue smoke from my grill as I prepared for what would be the most satisfying public confrontation of my military career. Tomorrow, a serial federal fraudster who'd systematically targeted military veterans was about to face the consequences of picking the wrong neighbor. She'd escalated from harassment to federal crimes while cameras recorded everything. The town meeting would be her final performance before federal custody, and I had front row seats to watch justice finally catch up with someone who thought she was above the law. The Cedar Ridge Municipal Building hadn't seen this much excitement since the County Fair pig incident of 2019. By 6 p.m., every parking space was filled, news vans lined the street, and over 200 people crowded into a space designed for half that number. The air buzzed with anticipation mixed with the scent of fresh coffee and nervous energy. Local TV stations had promoted this as a special environmental recognition ceremony, but Sarah's media contacts had spread word that something bigger was happening. Federal agents positioned themselves discreetly throughout the audience, their presence adding an electric tension that had everyone whispering speculation. Delilah arrived fashionably late, sweeping into the building like she owned it, wearing a blue suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly mortgage. She brought her own private security detail and a professional photographer to document what she clearly expected to be another triumph. What she didn't know was that FBI agents had been monitoring her communications all week and were prepared to arrest her the moment she committed additional federal crimes in their presence. County Commissioner Bradley Walsh opened the meeting by recognizing outstanding community leaders who've demonstrated exceptional environmental stewardship. The usual municipal theater, complete with proclamations and ceremonial certificates that would normally put half the audience to sleep. But tonight was different. Tonight, everyone sensed they were witnessing something historic. We're honored to recognize the Whispering Oaks Homeowners Association and their president, Delilah Thornfield, for achieving remarkable water conservation success, Commissioner Walsh announced, reading from prepared remarks that would soon become evidence exhibits. Delilah approached the podium with complete confidence, her heels clicking across the wooden floor like a countdown timer. Behind her, my laptop was connected to the building's projection system, loaded with evidence that would destroy her life in the next 20 minutes. "Thank you for this recognition," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed room. "I'm proud to report that Whispering Oaks has exceeded every conservation target through innovative water management and community cooperation." She clicked through a PowerPoint presentation filled with fabricated statistics, claiming 35% usage reduction through strategic partnerships with neighboring agricultural water sources. Every number was a lie, every claim was fraudulent, and federal agents were recording every word. "Our success demonstrates that residential developments can achieve environmental excellence while maintaining luxury amenities," she continued, completely unaware that she was confessing to federal crimes. "We've proven that proper water management can benefit entire communities." The audience applauded politely, but I noticed several subdivision residents exchanging uncomfortable glances. Some of them had seen their actual water bills and knew the conservation claims didn't match reality. "Before we present the official recognition," I interrupted, standing from my back row seat, "I think the community deserves to see the complete picture of Whispering Oaks' water management program." Commissioner Walsh looked confused, but Sarah had already coordinated with meeting organizers to allow public comment during the presentation. "Mr. Briggs has requested time to address conservation efforts affecting his adjacent property," Walsh announced. Delilah's face went pale as I approached the projection controls. "I've prepared a brief video presentation showing actual water usage in the Whispering Oaks subdivision," I announced, watching her realize that her perfect evening was about to become a federal crime scene. The first footage showed Delilah's coordination calls from the morning of her false police report, her voice crystal clear as she planned to have me arrested for switching to my own water system. Gasps rippled through the audience as they heard her admitting the entire incident was staged. "What you're hearing," I explained calmly, "is Ms. Thornfield coordinating false police reports while I was legally switching from municipal to private water sources on my own property." The split-screen footage showed her lies versus documented reality, claiming I was stealing city water while I used my own well, claiming conservation success while her property consumed more water than my entire ranch. But the real bombshell came when I screened her grant fraud confessions. This footage was recorded during the morning she called 911, I continued, playing audio of her phone call about the grant money and needing to move faster before someone figures out their operation. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as people realized they were watching documented federal fraud confessing to systematic deception for financial gain. The federal grants Whispering Oaks received for water conservation were obtained through false claims about coordinating with my property's water sources, I explained, showing bank records and construction documents. They never had permission to use my water, never installed actual conservation systems, and spent federal money on decorative fountains that increased water consumption by 40%. Delilah tried to interrupt, demanding I stop presenting illegally obtained materials, but Commissioner Walsh had already recognized the federal agent standing in the audience. "Ms. Thornfield," Agent Jennifer Rodriguez announced, producing her FBI credentials, "you're under arrest for federal fraud, conspiracy, and systematic harassment of a military veteran." The sound of handcuffs clicking in the suddenly silent auditorium was like music from the most beautiful symphony ever composed. "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Rodriguez continued as photographers captured every moment of Delilah's public humiliation. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court." Delilah's perfectly applied makeup ran as she screamed about illegal surveillance and false accusations, but her voice was drowned out by the audience's shocked conversations and clicking cameras. The second arrest came when Agent Martinez approached Brad Thornfield, who'd been attempting to slip out the back door. "Mr. Thornfield, you're also under arrest for insurance fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to defraud federal agencies." Local TV cameras captured every moment as two people who'd thought they were above the law discovered what happens when you systematically target a Navy veteran who knows how to fight back with precision and patience. Commissioner Walsh suspended the meeting as federal agents cleared the building, but not before Sarah announced that her complete investigative report would air on the evening news and be published online within hours. Standing in the parking lot afterward, watching news crews interview shocked subdivision residents about their property values and legal liability, I felt the deep satisfaction of justice finally served at precisely the right temperature. Delilah had spent months trying to destroy my life through lies, harassment, and federal fraud. Instead, she'd handed me 18 hours of 4K evidence that would send her to prison and make my property the most famous ranch in Texas legal history. Sometimes the best revenge is simply giving people enough rope to hang themselves, then filming the entire process in glorious high definition. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch with a cold beer, watching the sunset paint my legally protected water features in golden light, reading the most satisfying court documents in Texas legal history. Delilah Thornfield, 8 years federal prison for conspiracy, fraud, and systematic harassment of a military veteran. Brad Thornfield, 5 years for insurance fraud, money laundering, and money laundering conspiracy. Their assets seized, their company dissolved, their criminal enterprise dismantled completely. But the real satisfaction came from watching justice ripple through the community like my grandfather's spring water flowing through channels he'd carved 60 years ago. The Whispering Oaks HOA was officially dissolved within 3 weeks of the arrests. The subdivision residents, faced with massive legal liability for their association's federal crimes, voted unanimously to form a new community organization based on neighbor cooperation instead of harassment campaigns. Property values did not collapse as Delilah had predicted. They actually increased by 15% due to positive media attention about the community that stood up to HOA corruption. Families started moving to Cedar Ridge specifically because they'd heard about neighbors supporting each other against criminal harassment. My 4K security footage became evidence in federal prosecutions across 3 states as victims of similar schemes came forward. The Department of Justice launched Operation Water Rights, investigating fraudulent conservation grants nationwide, with my documentation serving as the primary case study for prosecution training. The personal transformation felt even better than the legal victory. I used the $400,000 civil settlement to restore my grandfather's original barn and workshop to museum-quality condition, creating a living monument to Texas independence and self-reliance. The sound of authentic restoration work replaced the noise of harassment complaints. But my favorite change was starting Veterans Property Rights Consulting, using my military problem-solving experience to help other service members fight HOA abuse. Within 6 months, I was consulting on cases from California to Florida, teaching fellow veterans how to document harassment and build federal civil rights cases. The media attention brought unexpected benefits. Texas A&M University's Agricultural Extension program partnered with my ranch to demonstrate sustainable water management techniques. Graduate students conduct research using my dual water systems as a model for rural conservation that actually works. Every month, school groups visit for environmental education tours, learning about water rights, property law, and the importance of standing up to bullies. The sweet laughter of children discovering where their food comes from has replaced the bitter taste of legal warfare. But the crown jewel of our community transformation is the annual Cedar Ridge Heritage Days Festival, celebrating rural traditions and agricultural history. What started as my grandfather's private ranch has become a community gathering place where families learn about Texas independence and neighbor cooperation. Sarah's investigative series won a state journalism award for exposing systematic HOA corruption, and her follow-up articles helped inspire legislation limiting HOA powers and requiring transparency in community association finances. Sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword, especially when backed up by 4K evidence. The practical takeaways from this experience became a guidebook that's helped hundreds of property owners defend their rights. Always install comprehensive security camera systems covering property boundaries. 4K footage provides courtroom-quality evidence that wins federal cases. Document everything when dealing with hostile HOAs because patterns of harassment prove systematic targeting. Research your water rights thoroughly before buying property near developments, since pre-existing rights often supersede municipal restrictions. Most importantly, know your recording laws for gathering evidence, because audio documentation of coordination calls can prove conspiracy charges that transform harassment into federal crimes. The morning air carries different scents now, fresh coffee and success instead of legal documents and diesel exhaust from security patrols. My horses graze peacefully in pastures protected by law and documented by cameras that now monitor wildlife instead of criminal harassment. Standing in the same spot where I'd first turned off that water valve 18 months ago, I'm surrounded by neighbors who've become genuine friends, children who've learned about agriculture and independence, and visitors who come specifically to see the ranch that fought back and won. My grandfather's land isn't just my inheritance anymore. It's proof that Americans still have rights worth fighting for and neighbors worth defending. Federal prison was exactly where Delilah belonged, and Cedar Ridge is exactly where I belong. But speaking of entitled neighbors who picked the wrong fights, wait until you hear what happened when another California Karen tried to steal my friend's front yard because she didn't like their house color. That story involves tree law, property surveys, and the most expensive landscaping mistake in county history.
You know what gets me about this whole thing? Delilah thought she was so smart. 8 years in federal prison because she couldn't leave a man alone on his own land. But honestly, watching the handcuff clicks was just the beginning. The real victory? Justin Ranch is now a teaching site for water conservation. Kids take field trips there. The irony is thick enough to cut with a knife. Here's what nobody talks about with these HOA stories. It's never really about the rules. It's about control. Delilah saw a veteran living independently, and it drove her crazy. She couldn't stand that someone existed outside her little kingdom. And that 4K security footage, pure gold. 18 hours of a federal criminal confessing to crimes she didn't even know she was committing. You can't write this stuff. Look, I get messages from people every day dealing with their own neighborhood dictators. Different stages, same story. Someone with a clipboard thinks they run your life. What's your worst HOA story? I'm talking about the stuff that made you question your faith in humanity. Drop it below. And if you want to see more of these power-hungry busybodies getting what they deserve, you know what to do with that subscribe button. Because next time, we're talking about tree law. And let me tell you, nothing bankrupts a parent faster than messing with a wrong oak tree.